If I was starting now and Drift already existed, we wouldn't be able to catch up to Drift.
Web3 offers a brand new petri dish.
Our job is to buy great tech at great prices.
AI is also libertarian, right?
Enable a use case that people haven't been able to do today.
The next hundreds of millions of players, they will come to the market through mobile.
My personal reason why I could be bullish in the next 12 months is
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the BlockCrunch podcast. Now, one of my main theses as an investor personally is that Solana has become the cycle's top of funnel for new users. And there are more things to do this time on Solana than last cycle when Solana first debuted. With lower fees and faster transactions, it's also made it a much more palatable onboarding experience for newcomers than Ethereum. Now, in fact, I was looking at some of the statistics this morning as I was preparing for this episode, and according to the block, the active addresses over the past week on Solana have hit 1.5 million versus 600,000 for the entire Ethereum chain, and roughly the same for Base as well, which is the talk of the town currently. So amidst this backdrop where everybody is flocking to Solana, Drift, which is the dominant perpetual swaps exchange, is now launching its token very soon at the time of recording. But it was not always sunshine and rainbows, because after the FTX collapse in 2022, a lot of people assumed the Solana story was over, given how heavy of a presence FTX had in investing in the ecosystem. So today, I'm really excited to speak to the Drift founding team, Cindy and Chris, to get the insider scoop on what compelled them to stay with Solana through the hard times, their view on the ecosystem in this post-FTX world, how they became one of the dominant exchanges in crypto, in DeFi, as well as their plans for Drift in the coming year. So before I get started, as a disclaimer, nothing we discuss here is financial advice. I'm a personal angel investor in Drift, and we may also hold assets discussed on the show. So all opinions are personal and not reflective of our respective companies' official opinions. So welcome to the show, Cindy and Chris. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Before we dive into things, would you guys want to give a one-liner intro each about just what you guys do at Drift?
I can kick it off. Cindy, one of the co-founders of Drift. My background is in quant trading, been in the space since 2017, and previously ran a crypto hedge fund doing a bunch of different algorithmic strategies within perp platforms. And my role at Drift is one of the BD product people. I like to call myself an intern that just does everything.
I love it.
Yeah, and I'm a lead developer. I work on smart contracts and then just help coordinate all our devs to kind of work in unison. So we work towards the same goal.
That's awesome. And Cindy, I think you're one of the few people I've brought on the show that is in crypto even earlier than I was, because you were in 2017 already. And I remember when I first met you, you were doing a lot of trading. You were wearing a lot of hats. So kind of what inspired you to put on the Drift hat? What inspired you to create Drift? And what makes it different from other stuff out there?
I started back in the space because I saw huge opportunities and inefficiencies in the crypto markets, especially when it came to early exchanges. So there were huge price discrepancies within even spot exchanges at the time. One favorite trade of mine was actually arbitraging the kimchi premium and US markets for Bitcoin. And while this is a similar founding story to other traders in the space, we took it a step further and started building out strategies to also arbitrage against other perp exchanges at the time. And back in 2017, 2018, the only couple perp markets were BitMEX and OKX, and there were huge spreads around that time as well. We continue to see the spreads go down as more algorithmic traders and sophisticated investors enter the market. But one kind of big question remained, and it was that because even though we're in crypto, where the ethos is decentralization, there were no signs of derivative markets growing within decentralized context, and there was no one really building up perps exchanges on blockchains itself. So I saw this huge opportunity back in 2021 to build out a derivatives exchange on what we thought was the fastest blockchain at the time, Solana. It was still starting to take off, but we saw early signs of growth with the founding of Radium, Orca, and adoption of usage in AMMs. And I think one key moment that struck me was when I tried Radium and Orca for the first time in 2021, and it was like magic. It was like a 10x faster user experience than what I was used to on Ethereum. And so that gave me a lot of conviction to kind of go out and be like, let's grow this DeFi pie and bring derivatives to the mix.
This episode is brought to you by YGG. I'm very excited to partner with Yield Guild Games to bring you today's episode. You may know YGG as the leading guild in Web3 that helped drive the success of games like Axie Infinity and Pixels, but they actually have much bigger ambitions than just that. I've really enjoyed co-investing with and also learning all about gaming from their founder, Gabby Dazon. So here is Gabby to tell us more about how guilds actually add value to games.
There's a lot of value that our guild members bring into a game. So our guild members are very Web3 native, and there's different types of roles that are needed in a Web3 game. So our guild members are game testers, they're content creators, they're UGC creators, they're esports champions. And all of these roles are needed to bootstrap the player liquidity of a game. And YGG typically is one of the first groups to provide this in a Web3 game.
And now, back to the episode. Yeah, and I actually love to kind of dive into that, the Solana side of the story, and I love for Chris to jump in as well from the technical side, because when you guys first started building Drift, obviously there were a lot of chains around. It's not just Solana, Ethereum L1, and I think some L2s were starting to come to market. I forgot if they were live already, but what were kind of the key factors that led you guys to choose Solana, and how has Solana's kind of unique architecture and the community influenced your development?
Yeah, I think we were just blown away by how good the tech was at the time. I mean, now it's like everyone's agreed that high performance chains are going to be popular, but at that time it was still, I think, a contrarian thing to think that it wouldn't be L2s. So I think when you actually tried using the chain, it was really impressive how well it worked. And then on the developer side, like very early on, you saw a very strong community evolving. So I think one thing that was really important was Tolly was very active in the developer community on Twitter, encouraging people to like build open source code and share with each other. So that was like very immediately like valuable. And then you saw early devs like Armani, et cetera, like building out Anchor, and it was very like magical. So coming into that, it was like, okay, I definitely want to build here. It felt like the beginning of something super special, in addition to the tech.
I remember like back then, the infrastructure wasn't fully ready. I remember like testnet and mainnet had like different documentations. And in terms of wallets, I don't even think Phantom was around yet, right? There's only Solid, which is a really, really shitty wallet back then. Did you guys have Phantom when you first started?
When we first started, Phantom hadn't launched yet. So yeah, it was only Solid. And then I think while we were developing our V1, Phantom launched. So it was definitely like, it felt like you were getting in on the ground floor. But it was very like explosive. Like once people realized it was good, it was like everything started popping up at once. So it was a really fun time to get started, because everyone realized like, oh, this chain is going to be like special.
It's also a pretty contrarian bet, as you mentioned, because I think a lot of people thought that EVM was the be-all and end-all. We got to build on EVM-compatible chains, and obviously some of the chains that promise kind of faster finality were EVM-compatible as well, but Solana was not, right? Solana was very much its own thing, and it's building in Rust instead of Solidity, where everybody else seemed to be building at the time. So was that like a conscious trade-off? Like, were you guys worried at any time that, hey, maybe this thing is going to be its own isolated little ecosystem away from like all the EVM stuff, or was that never like a concern?
Yeah, I can kick this off. At the time that we started building, we were considering building on L2s as well. We were looking at kind of the entire spectrum of, hey, what's the bet that we should take? Because we were starting off fresh, and we basically had had architecture, but wanted to bring it to a Sun chain. And there were a couple of factors that we considered. One was how live was this technology, and how like tested had it been. The interesting thing is that back in 2021, even Arbitrum had not launched yet. I think they were in DevNet still, or testnet still. So we were looking at basically only either deploying on Ethereum L1, which was an impossible task, or deploying on chains like BSC that maybe had less mature ecosystems, but were pretty much just like EVM L1 forks. So at the time, the decision wasn't sort of like Arbitrum optimism. It was like Ethereum L1 and Solana. So for us, that became very clear that we should make a bet on the faster chain with a very strong community. And you're right, a lot of the documentation was very primitive back then. I think we actually found it a struggle to do that. But what was bullish and why we can kind of continue was developer support was pretty amazing. The other teams were very energizing and excited and motivated about the chain. And I think that sort of created this viral effect within the developer community. And yeah, that's why we stuck to the chain.
It's funny you bring up the no documentation because like that sounds like it would be an issue or a bug, but then somehow it became a meme of like chewing glass, where then people were like proud of how hard they had to work to launch stuff. So it was like kind of counterintuitive, but it became like this. Like if you were actually building, it was like impressive, you know. So it flipped, and yeah. I mean, everyone in crypto wants to be early, so to feel like you are getting into this new ecosystem that has a chance to be 10x different and actually be something new, I think is just very compelling.
Yeah, and I think what was impressive was also like after FTX happened, because they were so heavily involved in the ecosystem, right? They were doing Serum and all these things. A lot of people were just like, okay, it's over for Solana. They've lost all the support. You guys were one of the kind of handful of projects that really stuck around and really kind of believed in it. And obviously it paid off, right? I think, Cynthia, you were tweeting about some of the recent metrics for Drift, and they're just insane in terms of the amount of growth that you guys had in the past few months alone. Was it 3 months or like 1 month?
Say the turning point was probably September last year, so 6 months ago. And maybe I can give some color on what life was like post FTX for us, and how that sort of changed. But I think one of the key things post FTX was actually attracting institutional liquidity and traders from other chains. A lot of our traders and user base on Solana continue to stay even post FTX. And the funny thing is that our V2 actually launched the day that FTX crashed. And at first we were like, oh, this kind of validates our thesis that you should be trading on DEXs and not centralized exchanges. Obviously, tragedy for the industry and set us back a lot. But we didn't realize like how deep it would get for Solana, and how kind of the impression that FTX was involved in, like, you know, the founding of Solana and the acceleration of Solana would cut into the actual usage of the chain. We had naively thought that, okay, this would, you know, drag people to start using decentralized exchanges and motivate them to do so, but that didn't happen. In fact, the opposite happened, where users actually went to other centralized exchanges, and market makers didn't see the point of trading on Solana. And this kind of goes back to the fact that Solana is a much more difficult environment to operate in. A lot of market makers were natively integrated within EVM already, but Solana is sort of this whole separate ecosystem. So the trade-off for them was like, why should I build all this tooling to join the Solana ecosystem when there's like nothing happening there? So there was a big kind of negative feedback loop around that time. And so it was very difficult from a BD perspective, because we got people asking us all the time. It's like, when are you moving out of Solana? Like, when are you going to build an arbiter more optimism? Mostly on the investing side, users still saw that there was light on Solana. It was like, if they use the product, they would be like, oh, this is great. This is awesome that I don't have to pay, $5 gas fees. But I think outside of the user base that we had, it was very difficult to actually, grab people in. So our strategy was actually to go really deep on the ground and literally one by one convert traders, market makers, and no matter in what scale. So it could be like the smallest guy, like looking to trade $1,000, or bringing in boutique market makers or individual people who were able to provide liquidity. So it was very low to the ground work, but I think it eventually paid off. Now we're getting a lot of inbound these days, but it wasn't the case 6 months ago.
Yeah, no, I remember during the bear market, you guys were DMing traders or people with a following, who built a following based on trading, just to kind of get them onboarded. And it was like the type of unscalable shit that you have to do to really kind of scale in the long term. So I have a lot of respect for that. were there kind of any specific lessons that you took away from kind of navigating that bear market when users seem to be leaving, when the market seemed to be shrinking, that you think other founders can learn from, when we get the next bear market? Who knows when it's going to be?
The main thing is just a startup is a concentrated bet. And you can't really hedge that concentrated bet. So for us, it was just sticking with Solana, knowing we had a good product and just like committing and making sure that we were going to make the best product we could, versus like hedging our bets and going across multiple chains and then having a bunch of inferior products scattered about, hoping one of them would work out. Because if you try to hedge your bets, some other player will be more concentrated and focused, and they'll outcompete you. So you really just got to double down on your intuition and your strategy. And then like there is a chance that you lose out, but like you're definitely going to lose out if you hedge. So you just got to commit. And the worst thing that happens is, your vision is wrong, and then you run it back and try again. But you can't hedge basically.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable advice, because what we noticed from like last DeFi cycle was like a lot of projects were hedging very actively, right? They were trying to do a multi-chain strategy. But yeah, I think you're completely right in that I've never seen a project that has replicated the same amount of success on another chain just by kind of bridging over to the other chain just because they saw users in that chain. So I think that's a very valuable piece of advice. I'd love to kind of, my last point on the Solana part before we dive deeper into Drift itself is, I'm actually curious, like if you guys were to start Drift today, do you think you would still have gone for Solana? Because a lot of the original rationale for you guys was like low fees and high speed. And now there are a lot of these kind of faster chains, especially with the whole hype around like parallelized EVM chains coming up with faster execution. How do you think about where Solana sits relative to those other kind of up and coming shiny chains?
I think there's kind of this notion that the history can't really be like replicated in other places. So the richness of a chain and the richness of kind of what has led to design decisions of a chain sort of compounds over time. And I think what we're really bullish on Solana and why I think if we were to start Drift today, it would be definitely still be top choice, is that the knowledge and the information that the chain has gathered from all the past like couple of years of trial and error has continued to like cause it to innovate over time. Even now, we're still seeing some levels of congestion on the chain, of course. But I think what's interesting is that there's constantly updates, constantly innovation happening. 1.18 updates for the schedule is coming in a couple of weeks. Fire Dancer validators launching in a couple of months. And we're seeing new token standards and new standards continue to pop up. And I think what drives us is looking at where kind of the locus of innovation lies. And that intersection with a very strong community with storied history, I would say still makes it one of the better places to build. That's it. I think there's a lot of interesting things happening in other chains as well that's worth looking at.
Yeah, I guess it's tricky because I like to think that if I was starting now and Drift already existed, we wouldn't be able to catch up to Drift. So, yeah, there's definitely some element of like these chains are very, they're like community and social based, and there's brands. So if like you have to go start on somewhere that there's already established players and they're like kind of at the core, it can be hard to compete with them. Which is why there's this incentive for founders to go and try to do different chains, just because like you're trying to be a part of that early community. So I don't know. It's a tricky question. If we had to start over, but Drift already existed, would we still go on Solana if someone else was running Drift? I guess I hope the answer is no.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think this is something that's underappreciated by Web2 founders as well. I don't think you have to think about what portion of the internet you're building for versus like in Web3, you're kind of inherently making a bet on the L1 growing as well. Because if you pick a great fast L1, but there's like 3 users there in 3 years time, then that's not a great bet at all. But yeah, I think you guys made a really great call, took a massive risk, as you mentioned, like a concentrated bet, and it really paying off. So I'd love to kind of dive into details for Drift itself here. So we've looked at a lot of decentralized perpetual swap exchanges, a lot of DEXs in the past, and it's increasingly crowded. It was already crowded last cycle. It's getting more crowded now as more smart teams are kind of building in this space. So what do you guys think is the thing that kind of sets Drift aside from all these other DEXs and perp swap exchanges out there?
I'd say that Drift is the only perp DEX that's natively built on an L1 that has managed to kind of attract both composability with other exchanges on the chain and other use cases in the chain. So one key example is that I think we're one of the perp DEXs that have cross-collateral. And this is a very trader-focused feature that we built because we understand that traders need this. But it's very difficult to do on other perp DEXs because they're sort of isolated on their own app chains or their own L2 execution layers. Whereas because we are natively built on an L1, we get to benefit from the assets that already exist on the L1. So one example is actually native USDC itself. We are able to accept native USDC as collateral. We're able to accept SOL and also LSTs as collateral, as well as wrap to ETH and wrap to BTC. That was a huge part of our core design because we believe that traders don't like to just hold on to stables. They like to hold on to all other different types of assets, and this actually creates a really cool breeding ground for new assets and new stable coins to come in as well. Some examples being, let's say Athena USDE, or what BlackRock is bringing with BitOpen. How can we enable tokenized treasuries to be used as collateral? So it opens a really creative design ground. I think that's one. Second is continuing to ship features that we believe are interesting and important to traders. So we have focused on very aggressive market listings, and that's uniquely sort of enabled by our presence and our ability to use different Oracle sources, even outside of Solana. So we're not, while we are natively built here, we can also bring in assets from other chains to be traded.
I feel like a lot of that experience must be kind of, a lot of those feature designs must be informed by your experience as a trader, right? Because the things you mentioned, cross-collateral, they're very kind of, you won't know them unless you're like a trader yourself as well. So how much of Drift's design was kind of based on your own frustrations as a trader when you use some of these other kind of DEXs?
Yeah, I think it informed a lot of the early design because as a trader myself, I realized that these are features that a lot of people in crypto needed. And I think when you look at the growth of centralized exchanges in general, it was sort of the evolution was interesting. Binance started with only USDT margin contracts. BitMEX started with only quantum settled futures where they were all settled in BTC. So we kind of thought that the unified cross-collateral model was kind of marrying those two concepts together, where you deposit any asset in an account, it gives you an asset weight. So it acts sort of like a borrow lend market in the back end, which comes from more of a DeFi native angle, and then using that to give you margin on your perps as if they were like a borrow lend asset. So I think knowing that those options existed in centralized exchanges and growth actually came towards exchanges that offered this unified collateral option was one of the key principles of Drift.
Another nice thing about that in the L1 like integrated context is there's a lot of other like tokens that people want to use as collateral that are native to Solana. So whether it's like the recent tokens like Pith and Jito, or an AI token like Render, or even meme coins like WIF, there's like all these crypto native users want to be using that to trade, and whether they want to increase their exposure long or they want to hedge out their exposure. Drift is kind of like a mini CME for crypto native assets on Solana. So it kind of becomes like this derivative primitive for this crypto native economy.
I guess from the technical perspective, to build that cross-collateral system, is it much harder to do that on like L2 exchange or like something that has its own app chain, like a DYDX? Like, could they incorporate something like this? And what type of trade-offs would they have to make?
It's definitely easier to bootstrap on an L1 or an integrated exchange, because to deal with the liquidations for the spot assets, you need spot liquidity. So for Drift taps into Jupiter, spot like aggregator. It integrates with Phoenix and OpenBook. So doing those spot liquidations, we didn't have to like build out that spot liquidity ourselves, which makes it much safer to list those, versus if you're on an L2 and people are bridging their L2, like their L1 assets to the L2, you have to like bootstrap that whole spot market in addition to your perp market. So for Drift, we're pretty strong at the perp markets, and then we can inherit the spot liquidity, which is pretty nice to enabling like this cross collateral for longer tail assets.
Yeah, this is why like I think when a lot of people try to make the argument to me that the future will be just every app is its own chain, there will be like hundreds of thousands of blockchains, I've always been very, very skeptical. I think that the more likely thing is either like a monolithic approach, or you have like one chain for one type of assets, where you have like a spot DEX and a perp DEX and lending and so on, just precisely because of what you just mentioned, Chris. I think this is something that I don't think a lot of perp dexes seem to be thinking about, considering how many of them want to do their own chain or want to be on L2s. Why do you think that is? Like, why are these chains deliberately kind of taking on this trade-off of fragmenting liquidity?
I think the key thought for a lot of these other perp dexes, and obviously for us as well, is isolated and highly performant execution environments is very important. And this is part of the reason that a lot of other perp dexes, they centralized parts of their order book or parts of their execution engine, because they're unable to execute that fully on chain in other places. And that's why they're like, okay, I'm going to build my own L1 or my own L2 that actually solves this problem for me, and that I don't have to share block space with other applications that might congest the chain. And this is really important actually, because you, as a perp dex, especially when dealing with leverage, want to be able to liquidate users effectively and be able to ensure that that the exchange doesn't pause or is prone to problems with the underlying chain. So centralizing that is one solution. The other solution is figuring out, I guess, on our side, and the trade-off that we made was that we believe that the execution environment on Solana as a particular L1 is already good enough. And we've also made trade-offs to continue to keep a lot of the execution on chain itself. Because for us, the trade-off is like, if we actually built an L2 that's secured by an multi-sig, that's basically just a centralized exchange. And as a result, we went the other way and decided to build optimizations around L1. And I can let Chris talk about.
If you just want to replicate a SEX one for one, building your own L2 or your own app chain is the way to go. And yeah, you can get more performance for market makers, especially. Like, I think the market makers wanting a SEX-like API is what drives a lot of the push for app chains and L2s. But yeah, we kind of saw the benefit of being like at the heart co-located with all these other apps. So we went through the process of like trying to innovate on how the like order matching and risk engine all work so that it can be on chain, so we can co-locate with these other apps. And we think that's a unique advantage. And it's also harder to replicate than I think putting like a SEX on a like single box on like a L2 or app chain. So it's yeah, just different set of trade-offs.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think speaking of other perp dexes, I'm sure when you guys kind of pursued your go-to-market as well, you looked at past attempts at dexes, maybe not just perp dex, but just any dexes, what worked and what failed. What are some major lessons you guys had from studying how other kind of prior attempts came to market?
Yeah, I think the biggest learning was actually that one, your position of dominance is not guaranteed if you sort of just sit at the top and sit on your hands. A lot of previous dexes sort of got to the top and then didn't do much to innovate or add new things for traders to use, and as a result, lost shininess over time. I think one of the big things was actually that staying extremely relevant to the latest trends and continuing to give traders what they want in a bull market, especially, is very important. So aggressive listings, while obviously maintaining good risk management was key for us. And I think that's how we got a lot of our edge over other cryptexes by being very attuned to what the market is trading. So meme coins being one. We were one of the first cryptexes to list WIF as both collateral and perp. And today it's actually our fourth biggest market, surprisingly. So it's things like that, I think, that continue to drive dominance forward. The other thing is that I think perp products specifically and DEX products are extremely complex, and the difficult part in prior DEX's go-to-market is that they either make the product too complex or too simple to use, such that all the information is abstracted away from the user. We like to strike a middle ground, and learning from a lot of these past kind of UI evolution is that sometimes offering options for users is good. So we now have a light mode and a pro mode. A light mode is literally just like an 8 button. You buy market orders only, slippage tolerance, and then pro mode is where you go for all the advanced orders that you need. So yeah, I think that was one of the key lessons that we realized, is that there's a big user base in crypto. They all come from different levels of experience, and we wanted to build a product that was able to speak to all levels of experience with trading.
It sounds like there's quite a lot of lessons borrowed from like centralized exchanges as well, because some of the things you mentioned in terms of like listing fast or kind of enabling pro mode and kind of normie mode. These are kind of common things that seem to have emerged as design metas, I think, last cycle for the biggest centralized exchanges. So I don't think I've really seen a lot of that incorporated into DEXs, but I think you guys are kind of the most aggressive in terms of like incorporating some of those features. I don't know if I interrupted you, Chris. Anything to add there? All right, so I think one thing that obviously there was a little bit of a hiccup on the road to success for you guys was there was an incident before with Drift where there was some bet that was that was accrued to the platform. So can you just kind of explain what happened there? When did this happen, and how are you guys? What are you guys doing to prevent kind of potential future issues? This
in May of 2022, during the Luna crash to zero. There was an issue in the platform where essentially there was a lot of levered shorts. So a lot of traders were coming in the platform and shorting Luna. The asset went down, obviously, to zero. And what ended up happening was Luna was an unchecked, non-isolated market on the platform. And the platform accrued some bad debt because there were too many levered shorts on the platform. What ended up happening was that we ended up paying a lot of the users back from protocol fees, and we doubled down and essentially rebuilt the entire risk engine from scratch, and incorporating a lot of the lessons that we took from this incident. So we launched V2 a couple of months later that featured a completely rebuilt risk engine that featured a couple of things that would have prevented this issue. One is that we now have a P&L unsettled layer on top of the exchange itself. So you needed to match every loss with every win with a loss on the platform in terms of P&L, such that you'll never have imbalances with the number of lever shorts. If you're unable to settle P&L, or your P&L kind of exceeds the existing pool on the platform, you won't be able to withdraw. So there's a lot of guardrails and checks in place now to prevent this sort of unchecked levered losses from happening. We also added a couple of other features with which I'll let Chris talk about on risk management and making sure each asset is weighted correctly.
Yeah, there was a lot of things that were improved, but including so in the V1, perp markets weren't isolated. So in V2, basically losses in one perp market can just be completely containerized or put into kept into that a single market, which makes it way safer for longer tail listings. So each market has like a maximum insurance that could be pulled. So if we just launched pre-launch markets, which are of course riskier, they have limited insurance, and that makes it safe for all other users on the platform. We also just leaned into bigger insurance funds, so users can stake into insurance. So it increases the amount of insurance for if there are bankruptcies, and then even the bankruptcy processes on the platform are very standardized because inevitably things will go crazy. There'll be markets that go to zero again. So just basically planning for the worst case and making sure if that happens, there's an orderly process of handling it. And then, there's a lot of P&L and borrowing limits that basically throttle how fast leverage can be extended and how fast money can leave the system. And I think overall, we the core contributors basically lean towards prioritizing risk management over UX if there has to be a strict trade-off, because basically if you lean too much in UX, especially in a bull market, people want more and more, and that can jeopardize the overall platform. So always just putting solvency and risk management top, and having it trump everything else is super important.
Yeah, and I hope that we don't see another kind of straight to zero type of case in crypto ever again. That was the longest week of all of our lives, I assume. But speaking of that, let's kind of look forward a little bit. Let's look to the future of Drift, right? Looking ahead, what are some of the major milestones for you guys? I know there are some plans for decentralizing as well. Can you kind of walk us through what are the biggest things coming up?
Yeah, biggest thing on our roadmap at the moment is decentralization. So we've been very excited to and very lucky to have built in the space for so long. And now we're excited to start having the community have a lot more say and in the direction of the future of Drift. So governance is going to be a big feature coming up. One thing that we are very excited about is what it enables in terms of permissionless listings as well. So, in the future, in the very near future, people will be able to suggest markets that they want to list and be able to have a say in new features, unlocks for the exchanges. So, yeah, we're very excited about decentralization. I think it's a big step forward for us and in enabling just a full decentralization. And we've done it on the tech side, and we're excited to do it in the community side as well. Outside of that, we're looking forward to scale out more improvements to our underlying DEX. We've built a pretty cool platform that has order book scaling on an L1 itself. But there's a lot of interesting things that we also want to do on the infrastructure and scaling side to continue to reap the benefits of being natively integrated on L1.
And anything else on the roadmap that you're excited for, Chris?
I'm excited for everything Cindy brought up. We recently just launched pre-launch markets, so allowing users to trade tokens before they're actually launched on chain. So there's currently a WPerp. I think Camino and Parcel are coming soon. So I think that's a really exciting feature that we just came out with. More broadly, I'm excited about the CME for crypto native assets on Solana. So just as DePIN, AI, more meme coins are all coming online, Drift being the derivative protocol for them to get listed on and people to basically hedge out their exposure and just keep using those assets. I'm very excited for that.
Yeah, and it's very clear to me that you guys keep a very close tab on what's happening in the market, kind of just knowing what are the things that people want to trade. But for people who want to do the other thing, which is to keep tabs on you guys instead of the other way around, what are the best channels for them to do this? Where should they follow you guys? Where should they engage with you guys?
We're definitely the most active on Twitter. We recently launched a Telegram community as well that's linked on our Twitter. So yeah, please follow us on Twitter. We're at Drift Protocol. And we have a vibrant Discord community too, if you like to submit feature requests or like to talk about the platform. So yeah, all three places are good.
3 favorite words of a VC with a vibrant Discord community. So make sure I the links to the show notes below for you guys who are watching or listening at home to engage. And thank you so much for coming on the show, Cindy and Chris. This is fun.
Thank you so much for having us, Jason.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, thanks for supporting another episode of the BlockCrunch podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you're listening to this on. It really helps us a lot. Or if you prefer YouTube, you can subscribe to our channel on YouTube as well to not miss an episode. I'd love to hear from you guys as well, and I personally make sure to read every single comment on YouTube or tweets that are directed at me. So feel free to leave a comment there. Let us know what project you want us to bring on or what trends you want us to talk about, or tweet at me at Mr. Jason Choi or at the BlockCrunch on the platform previously known as Twitter, currently known as X. And thank you so much for supporting, and I'll see you in the next episode.